to be joined here by Brett Gosper, the CEO of World Rugby. Brett, I've put a decent backdrop for you. You like it? Is it okay?
Thank you for that. Thank you. I just wish it was real.
I was going to ask you, like, I don't know if a lot of people know or not, but you got your background in advertising. Was that actually your first love?
That's right. No, actually, rugby is probably my first love. But yeah, I was an advertising executive with different agencies in different parts of the world, and it was a fun sector to be involved in, and it taught me a lot. It had me involved in a lot of different companies, a lot of different brands, a lot of different sectors in the market, and I think it was a very good training for me to move into this role. So yeah, it was where I started.
I know you've been, like you say, heavily involved in a lot of initiatives, and I think one of them was rebranding from the IRB to World Rugby. Why was that?
That's right, because we're on a conquest strategy. We're trying to reach new markets, new demographics, categories, women, younger audiences. We wanted World Rugby, or the IRB as it was then, to be the voice of brand rugby. And actually, if you call the IRB, only people in the sport knew what that was, and it tended to, even for them, conjure up images of a group of people in a room making decisions about the sport. So the movement to World Rugby meant people knew who was actually messaging. Also, it felt a more inclusive, branded group. We're trying to become a movement rather than just a federation. It's a movement for all of the sports. So it's worked very well for us. We've seen some real uptick in our presence on social media in particular, and I think our branding and our single-minded labelling of World Rugby has helped with that a lot.
One thing I really wanted to make a point of in terms of what you just said is, like, even in the governance, a lot of women on board too.
That's right. There's been some big changes in governance. We did a complete review about 2 to 3 years ago now, and one of the outcomes of that has been ensuring that those extra votes that some nations have, but they didn't have extra people, were filled by women. So now about 36% of our council are women, and it's gone from it being 0% about a year ago. So that's quite a culture shift, and it's a very positive one that'll see some great outcomes.
Women in sport participation through the roof as well now, yeah?
Yeah, people get surprised when you say that we've got about 9 million people around the globe participating in rugby now, and 25% of that, and growing, is women.
Oh, wow.
And we know that last year in the world there were more new registered players that were women than were men, and that's the first time that's happened as well. So it's a hugely important area for us in terms of our growth going forward.
And you're the man who got rugby back into the Olympics. I mean, how big has that been for rugby after Rio?
Well, I wouldn't take credit for getting
Don't be
rugby
humble
back
now.
in the Olympics, but certainly it was fantastic for the sport.
Yeah.
We know there are 2 big events that create a growth in our fan base. We have about 300 million fans around the world, as we define it in our research. Only 2 big events in rugby grow that fan base. A Rugby World Cup grows it by about 25 to 30 million. That's a 6-week event, as we know, and a big focus on rugby. Just 6 days of the Olympics grows our fan base by about the same amount.
Oh, wow.
So it's a fabulous growth engine for us, the Olympics, and we're very fortunate to be there, but I think also the Olympics are fortunate to have us there as a sport.
With the women and the ladies in the Olympics, you were at the World Cup this year in San Francisco. I mean, for a non-rugby playing nation, let's be honest, how big was that? Because I thought it was a fantastic event.
Yeah, you often look before a Rugby World Cup and say, what's 3 days every 4 years as a Rugby World Cup really? Is it really going to move the needle? Is it going to really do something in terms of development? And actually, I think we've got a very good answer in San Francisco, which is in an iconic baseball stadium, the Giants Stadium in San Francisco, massive setting on the bay there that all Americans can associate with successful sporting events and so on. You know, we had 100,000 people there over the 3 days. We had the highest ever television audiences on NBC, who covered it brilliantly over that period. So it had a massive impact. All of our sponsors and potential sponsors were there. And I think it helped us accelerate some of our signings for the HSBC World Series and so on. So it really did have a great development impact on the sport.
Now, I want to hit you about your rugby career, because it was actually quite decent, you know. I mean, you actually faced the All Blacks a couple of times, didn't you?
I did, unfortunately, yeah.
Unfortunately. You played for Victoria, though. You played for
Victoria for a number of years. I played up in Queensland. I moved up there to play. I was an Australian under-21 player. And then I moved to France, actually. I played a couple of Wallaby trials, actually, for tours to Argentina and to England, and the selectors in their wisdom didn't select me, which they're probably bang on about.
I'm with you. I'm hearing you.
And so I was asked to go off and play a season in France for the racing club in Paris, and 1 season turned into 9 seasons, and 6 months turned into actually 14 years in Paris. So and I played with the French Barbarians against the All Blacks, against Victoria for the All Blacks, played against the Junior All Blacks when I was a junior Wallaby, and so I've been on the wrong end, as the current Australian team seem to be, of an All Black haka and a New Zealand team. So yeah.
I mean, but what was it like facing the All Blacks for you?
Look, you knew in some way you were playing the game of your life, and I guess that's the problem that the All Blacks have every time they go to a field. Everyone's playing the game of their life against them, and so they have to step up every time. But it was a great privilege and honour, and I remember that in the different games I played, we always had a system of dealing with the haka, and of course it didn't work in any configuration that we did, whether it be stand in a circle holding hands or stare them out or just keep doing the warm-up and ignore it. Nothing worked.
Was anyone you were scared of in the All Blacks?
All of them.
That's all. Brilliant.
There was no exception there.
Now, you talk about Racing, and you were over there for a long time, and were you part of the movement that made the pink shirt? I wore this particularly just
well
for
done.
you.
Yeah, no, it's true. And that pink then evolved into Stade Francais jerseys, which became the Paris team after the racing club suffered harder times. But yeah, in the 80s, we were a team that pulled off a lot of marketing stunts, mainly because we thought, my God, we're playing in this game, we're on TV this week, we're probably going to lose, we won't be next week, so let's go out with a bang.
Look good.
And we kept winning, because every time we did a stunt, and we painted ourselves black, and we in one game in Toulouse, which we won, wore berets in Bayonne, and we won, and we rode on in bicycles in another place, and we actually tried to come on in a helicopter once, but they didn't give us an air passage into the Colombe Stadium in Paris. But then we played the final played the semi-final with the black bow ties, and then the final in '87 with pink bow ties, and then in '90. I wasn't playing. I actually retired then, which allowed them to win the final in '90. We lost in '87, and they wore the pink bow ties and drank the champagne at half time. So it was a nice attitude for an elite team in rugby at that time, and it made a lot of impact in the sport and outside the sport in France at that time.
Talk about elite. I heard through a little mouse that you actually captained an Italian side from Monaco.
Yeah, they're still in there. They are still talking about it in Monaco. It's fair. It'd be hard to miss that here. I think it was the 1986 Glenlivet Sevens, Monaco Sevens, and yes, I got a phone call from the French Federation. I was playing in France. They said, "Oh, do you know how to play sevens?" I said, "Well, why are you asking me that?" They said, "Well, Italy need a captain coach for the Monaco Sevens." I said, "Of course I've played a lot of sevens. I've played a hell of a lot of sevens. I better get down there." So yeah, I came down here, and it was a tough tournament because they're all national teams, and of course Italy had never played sevens and were a fledgling rugby nation at that time too. So we looked brilliant in our uniforms, and we handed across the little flag before each game and so on, but we did get hammered by the other teams of it. But we looked pretty good in jimmies that night, though, I've got to say, in our uniforms and ties. But yeah.
Oh, awesome. Now, I just want to focus a little bit on the World Cup next year in Japan. I mean, you've been across a couple of World Cups, but what are you expecting next year?
Well, we're expecting a very different look from the traditional look of rugby, and a non-traditional of the, let's say, the usual markets that host a Rugby World Cup. So just having rugby in the context of Japan, I think, will just cause many people inside and outside the game to take a second look at rugby, and that will be massive, I think, for the impact and the growth of the game. So, but it will be an exceptional World Cup. Everything is coming together. Everything seems to be well on track. They'll do it their way in a certain way, and that, I think, will give it that personality that people will remember. And I can feel, and we're seeing it in the numbers, that there's large numbers, larger than ever before, numbers of foreign people coming in to visit Japan at that time. Why not go to Japan? If you ever think of going to Japan in the context of a Rugby World Cup, is a great way of doing it, and that's what people seem to have concluded. Fantastic stadia. I think a very passionate. We know they're huge, big eventers, the Japanese, when they get behind. We're always worried a little bit that the Olympics might eclipse things, but actually there's been so many conversations about the two events that they're both riding very high, and the Japanese are very excited about the arrival of the World Cup there. So it'll be extraordinary. Yeah,
a very smart move from a very smart man. I just want to say before we tap out, can I get some tickets? To a final,
my usual answer is just send me the details, and we'll get back to you.
Always a pleasure, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Karl. Pleasure.